Some of the rooms had drop ceiling. They said, oh, there might have been a leak. There might be ongoing leaks. And I was like, uh-oh. So I thought maybe there were some leaks in the ceilings. Luckily, that didn't turn out to be the case. But then the house is a little uneven. And I was like, what's going on? Is my house sinking? Like, what's going on with the foundation here? And so we did the inspection. Luckily, he said, nothing's wrong with the foundation. There's no cracks or anything. Definitely get an inspection before, you go on the contract.
Welcome to the podcast, Real Estate Investing with Coach Carson. I'm your host, Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show to help you build a thriving rental property business so you can get out of the financial grind and do more of what matters. Whether you're a first-time listener or a long-time listener, thank you for being back for another episode. Today, I have another edition of a new series I'm doing called Deal Deep Dives, where I'm going to go in depth and ask all the questions you've always wanted to know about other investors' deals. The numbers, how they found the deal, how they financed it, how much cash they put into it, the mistakes they made, the things that did not go as well, but also the things that went well. And today I'm interviewing Michael Nguyen. He's actually somebody who's on my team here at Coach Carson. He edits my YouTube videos and my podcast videos, helps me with content. He's also a real estate investor. And I thought it'd be great early in this series to share a deal he did. He is a relatively new investor, and this is his second property in the Philadelphia area of Pennsylvania. And I'm going to save all the details for him, but needless to say, this was an interesting property, an older property, one that older properties, I love them, but they always have problems. And so I'm going to let him tell you all the details about himself and about this particular deal. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Chad. Great to be back. It's an honor. You don't have a lot of people that come on for a second appearance, so I am on that short list. So thank you for having me back.
You are indeed. So Michael has a special place in the podcast. Not only was he one of our early guests, I'll put a link to his first interview where he talked about his first house hack that he bought in Philadelphia, but he's also part of my team. He is my key team member. He's the one who edits the podcast. He was a student in my course, Real Estate Deal School. And so lots and lots of connections here. And Mike agreed, because this is a new series with the Deal Deep Dives, to come on and talk about a next deal that I don't know much about. I've been wanting to hear from Mike to find out more about this deal. And so a lot of what I'm going to hear is the first time. And we're going to go into the details of Mike's deal, talk about how he found it, things like that, just like we always do. And so are you ready to get started with the questions, Mike?
Yeah, I am. And where you are. Excited.
Awesome. So we're going to just start with some personal questions. Tell us your name and your age.
All right. I'm Michael Nguyen here. I just turned 30. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. And tell us a little bit about your career and your home location.
Sure. I edit videos. I produce videos for clients such as Coach Carson over here. And so I work remote, have my own business there. But then I wanted to dive into real estate on the side. And yeah, I started back in 2017, just as a student of yours. We kind of worked together for a couple of years, and then I finally made the plunge into actually investing in 2019. It's been good. Up and down from there.
I love getting to see the progress from the very beginning. Mike was a dedicated student. He was even having to save up money, and you can go back and listen to the first podcast to hear how that went. It took him a while to save up the first money for his down payment. So I love to see the full circle and how Mike's made progress over the years. That's one of my biggest joys as a coach, as a teacher. So particularly with Mike's story, has been a lot of fun. Tell everybody where you're from and where you're investing as well.
Sure. So originally I was born in New York City, but I moved at an early age to Philadelphia, set a lot of roots here, and been here ever since. Still here. And luckily enough, it was a strong enough market to also invest here as well. And it's not too expensive like the neighboring cities like DC or New York or Boston. So I'm here, I invest here.
Awesome. And before we get into the real estate details, tell us a fun or interesting fact about you.
So I love traveling, totally addicted. I have the travel bug just like you. And last year I was about 6-7 months. I was in Europe for mainly Turkey and a little bit of Spain as well. And I did a lot of travels throughout Europe, and I'm doing the same thing this year. So I'm a big travel enthusiast, very passionate about it, and just kind of using my career to kind of help fuel my travel desires.
Love it. And really, that's what this show is all about. Mike and I have a lot of these conversations offline, but we invest in real estate. We do these things so that we can do what matters. And Mike and I both share a passion for travel. He came and visited me in Spain, which was really cool. So we got to hang out in Granada and walk around the city and to see where I'm hanging out here. And so that was one of the benefits for me of his travel to Europe. So cool, fun, interesting fact. So let's dive into your real estate investing. And how long have you mentioned it earlier, you've been investing since 2017, is that right? As when you got started. And
Yeah, yeah.
tell us a little. So you know that in my podcast and in the classes I teach, I like to divide up your journey as a real estate investor into the, as a starter, when you're first getting into the business, you're buying your first deal or two, that's a starter. When you're in the wealth building stage, where you're trying to grow that nest egg into a much bigger nest egg, that's the wealth building stage. And then towards the end, where you're trying to turn that wealth into cash flow, that's the ender phase. Which phase would you say you are in your journey right now?
I would say mentally, to be honest, I feel like a starter. Always make mistakes, always try to learn more. But maybe like financially speaking, maybe closer to the wealth builder stage. I'm trying to grow my nest egg and, acquire more properties. So yeah,
Great.
that's the honest truth.
All right. Love the humility. I think I feel that way as well many times. So what strategy do you focus on? There's all the different kinds of things you can do: flipping, long-term rentals, short-term rentals, wholesaling, private lending. Which one of those do you land on from your strategy?
So I do long-term rentals, just buy and hold it. I mean, if it's a great deal and serves my purpose, hold it forever, for the rest of my life. I've seen like midterm rentals and short terms being very lucrative, but I tried to just hone in on long terms.
Great. All right. So we know where you live. You're in Philly, in the Philadelphia market, which is a big metro market, big city. I like to ask people about their buy box. Like what type of neighborhood are you looking in within the greater Philadelphia area? And then within that neighborhood, what types of properties are you looking at?
Sure. So Philadelphia city itself, depending on where you want to buy the neighborhood, it can get pretty pricey, expensive. So I tried to go around the Philadelphia area in a suburb. Right now, my two properties are in Upper Darby, which is a very historical suburb. It's the very first suburb of Philadelphia. And like within that, I tried to find places that are just a little more walkable, closer to public transit, closer to, main streets that are easy access into Philly. That's kind of like the buy box. And then I I bought two multi-unit families, so two duplexes, but I'm also very open to single family as well because I always like the benefits of single families.
Great. So smaller residential in general. And I know just to catch people up on your original story, you lived in one of the duplexes and had that as a house hack, and have since begun your travels again and kind of roaming around a little bit. So cool. So you're in Upper Darby, but interested in other locations, public transit lines, just kind of repeating some of those things. And is there any other criteria you look for that's as important in the house itself? Like now that you've owned a couple properties, like anything in particular that you look for, just from the structure of the house, the layouts, anything like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. After doing with these properties, I mean, these are good properties, but I'm definitely not buying an old house again. They're from like the 1920s, so there was a lot of deferred maintenance. They've just been really ongoing maintenance issues that feels like it's being settled now in 2023, but we'll see. But it's just been a lot of maintenance. So I'm trying to maybe look for a newer property, maybe in the 70s, ideally. If it's a single family, maybe like a ranch style home, like a simple home, like 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, maybe 2 baths as well. And just listening to like Scott Dixon and your episode, like he has a lot of features that kind of make a home less maintenance heavy. So I'm definitely looking for that in my buy box the next go around.
Yeah, I think that this is an aside, but I think this is a realization we all have as real estate investors. I know I've had it where you finally learn the reality of owning a property. It comes down to maintenance. It comes down to maintenance cost. And I always underestimated it early in my career. I'm like, okay, I'm making $300 a month in cash flow until I realized that I have to replace this and this and this. So yeah, you're not alone on that one, Mike. We've all been there. And I think one of the things that I've gotten hope to get better at, and is that you learn the real numbers when you start analyzing your third, fourth, fifth deal by using those first couple deals and the real numbers you've had to deal with. And older properties, I love older properties. I'm a sucker for them. I just love making them new, but you really do have to build in more replacement cost and maintenance cost, and often that makes it not a good deal. It just depends on how much you can. Yeah, I love the older properties that are total remodel. You have to gut the whole thing, because then you can fix up everything and know what you have. It's almost like a new construction. But if you have just in between, those are the hard ones where they're just good enough to get a tenant in, but then all the plumbing's leaking and the floors have issues. And yeah, I get it.
Yes, I've had all those and everything in between
Yeah.
happen to me, but yes,
All right.
absolutely.
Cool. Well, let's talk about one of those properties. Let's dive into this deal. And I love, let's kind of go chronologically here. And a lot of when I teach in the book that's coming out this year, The Small and Mighty Investor, I have sort of this order of operations when you go buy a property. And the first part is you have to find the deal. The deal doesn't just land in your lap. So let's talk about this particular deal and how you found it, what the source of the deal was.
Yeah, absolutely. So I not recently, but back then I networked with a wholesaler, and it's kind of like a wholesaler company per se. And so they would send me like lists of deals regularly, like through email, kind of like an MLS listing, but it was just wholesale properties. And so we looked at maybe like a dozen or half a dozen deals until I found one that I kind of liked. Um, and so yeah, he sent me the deal. It was a bit of a rush process, but I looked at it, I inspected it, or kind of inspected the outside and inspected the block to see what was good. And so the block was good. The house looked decent, at least from the outside in the pictures. So from there, I wanted to move forward.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to that. So you mentioned the wholesaler, and some people know what this means, but just for those who've never heard of a wholesaler or a wholesale list, like how do you find this kind of person, and who is this wholesaler person? What's their business model? What are they all about?
Sure. So I found him at a real estate investing meetup. And so wholesaler is a little different. I guess they go off market to creatively find deals, and they have a system for it, always creatively finding deals. And they primarily work with just investors, and they try to build relationships, long-term relationships with investors to try to wholesale property. So they buy it for a low price, and then they resell it for a little bit of a profit for them to an investor.
Got it.
That's mainly what the wholesaler does.
Good explanation. And this is actually how I got started as a real estate investor. I jumped into it full time, and I had to make money right now. I was not a rental investor, and I was a wholesaler. So I would go out and find deals for other people. And you're basically flipping houses, but you're flipping them to investors instead of to owner occupants. Although some wholesalers also flip to owner occupants. But the point is, I guess for everybody listening, this is a great source of leads. That doesn't mean every wholesaler is going to be a great source of leads, but I know a lot of students and people who I've interviewed have found deals through wholesalers. And so if you can build a relationship with them, at a minimum, get on their email list. That's the kind of a starter point. But I know I've had students who have success talking to the wholesalers, telling them, like Mike has his buy box. Like, here's my buy box. If you find anything in this neighborhood, this type of property, think of me. And often they need to move it quickly, or somebody else backed out of a deal. So those relationships always matter in real estate. And so he built a relationship with this wholesaler. And so it sounds like you just got an email on a deal. You looked at a bunch of them, and they weren't in your buy box, or weren't interested. This one, you were able to go look at the outside. Was it vacant? Was it occupied? Like, what was the situation of the property whenever you got that lead?
So it was a duplex. Half the side was vacant. The owner moved already, and he was living in that unit. And then the other half was occupied with a tenant. I think
Got
a
it.
long-term tenant there.
What were do you remember the list price or the asking price of the wholesaler when you got that email? Like just the number itself?
Yeah. So this was an interesting process, but for this particular property, it was a starting bid. It was almost like a bidding war, and the bid started at 205,000.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so it said, like, you have 5 days. We're going to take bids for the next 5 days, or like how did that process work?
Yeah, exactly that. I think they took bids over a few days, maybe 3 to 5 days. I think.
All right. So you went and looked at it. You didn't get to inspect the inside yet. Do I remember that right? So you had one side was vacant, one side was occupied. Were you able to get inside the vacant unit to look at it and do more detailed look at it?
No, no, I could only go from their pictures. Luckily, they had kind of software that did like a 3D virtual like tour of the property, so you can kind of get a decent understanding of the property without going in. But yeah, it was just that, and then like the exterior.
And so whenever you made you can make a bid, and I want to hear like what your process was thinking about your bid. Like, so did you weren't able to inspect the whole property, but you ran your numbers as we always encourage people to do, and you used a spreadsheet or you had your own back of the envelope numbers. What did you end up bidding, and like at what point in the process, like how did it go from there when you made your bid?
Sure. So I offered 214,000, a little bit, I guess, above bidding price. And I known that my wholesaler told me that there were other cash offer bids that were lower. Um, and eventually, yeah, they just accepted mines. The wholesaling company just accepted mines, and we went from there.
Okay. And so let's kind of dig into your offer a little bit more. So you offered 214. What were
Mhm.
some of the numbers that were important to you at that point? Like, and I know, a lot of people are going to listening to this. We're not going to have a spreadsheet to kind of draw it on a whiteboard like I usually do, but what were some of the key kind of indicators to you that, hey, this, I can pay 214 for this as opposed to paying 205? What were the numbers that you looked at?
Okay, so after I did the bid, I was able to go into the property. Um, and so like with my contractor, we looked inside the property, and the right then and there he kind of gave me an estimate, and I times it by like two and a half because there's two units, and then like the half was like a cushion. Um, so I kind of did the bid first, just which I don't know if I advised, but I kind of it was a little arbitrary. I just wanted to bid a little bit above the asking price.
Hmm.
But afterwards, I felt comfortable once I walked in and like did an estimate, got an estimate from my contractor. Hey, it's going to cost about 25,000 to fix up, both units, in the way
So
you want it.
did he give you a bid? Like, what was his number when as he went through and you made a list with him and he said, here's my number. What was that number? Just so we can kind of get an idea of that.
Oh, he estimated 25,000 both
Okay. So when
units.
you said
Yep.
when you said you round it, did you round it up from there? Did you say I think it'll be even more than that, or did you just say all right, I'm pretty good with 25?
I rounded it up a little bit more, but yeah, I felt at the time I felt comfortable with 25.
Okay.
I thought that was a conservative
Okay.
estimate.
So you knew if you paid 214 for it, you put 25,000 in repairs. What were your estimated rents at that time? Do you remember what you were thinking at the time you made the offer?
Yeah, it was 2,400 for both units, 2,400 a month.
So 1,200 per side.
Yep, 1,200 per side.
And the one that was already rented, was it rented for 1,200 bucks?
No, it was rented for 1,000. But I had done my due diligence, and I felt like even 1,200 was like a conservative estimate per unit.
Hmm.
I felt like I could go even higher, a little higher.
How do you calculate rent estimates? I know this is a question I get a good bit on YouTube when people are watching. They're like, how do you know it's $1,200 per month? Like that just seems like a number we pull out of the air. Like, how did you figure that out? And you said you did your due diligence.
Okay, yeah, I wish I had, this would have been a better idea, but I wish I had asked my property manager and like verified those numbers. But at the time, I looked on Zillow, and I looked at previous rents, and not previous, but current rents that were like near the area. Um, and I looked at the square footage, kind of compared it against my property. Is it bigger? Is it smaller? And then I kind of looked at the finish. Is it more luxurious, which I really didn't want, or is it like mid tier, or is it like lower tier? And I kind of used that as a gauge to kind of get to my own number
Hmm.
from there. So I saw rents around 1,300, from anywhere from like 1,200 to even 1,400, for my area around there, depending on how good the quality is, and even the block.
Got it. So you mentioned Zillow, which I like to use Zillow and Redfin because they're free and they're user friendly. You didn't just take the rent zestimate, which is another number they give. You actually looked at comparable homes. There's a tool, really cool tool on there where you can look at all the rentals in the area, either active or recently rented, and you just looked at one by one, saying how similar is this property? This one's rented for $1,300. This one's a little bit better than my property. This one's rented for $1,100. Mine's better than that one. So you just sort of did it like a self rental appraisal, basically, by looking at comparables. Is that accurate?
Yeah, exactly right. This estimate, usually they like inflate the price. From my experience, it seems like they always go higher, even for like estimate like sale prices and stuff like that. So it's good as a starting, but it's better to do like your own appraisal, in my experience.
Okay. So you estimated 2,400. You mentioned you would have liked to ask your property manager. What was that realization after the fact? We'll give a little preview of down the road, but what would you have discovered if you had asked the property manager ahead of time?
No, it just would have been nice to verify. But it actually, I mean, just fast forward a little bit, but it actually rented for even more than that. It rented for 1,250 per unit.
Okay.
At the end of the day. But
so
yeah.
you were pretty close on the rent. You were even a little bit below, which is great. Okay. All right. So, and this is not a, like, again, a whiteboard analysis deal, but if you were doing like rough math, rule of thumb, we talk about the 1% rule sometimes. Not that it's always possible in every market, but in Philadelphia, it's kind of a good hybrid market with some growth and also some cash flow. And you were looking at it saying, hey, this property could rent for $2,400 per month. Using the 1% rule, I would want to not have any more than $240,000 invested in the property. And so 240,000 minus 25,000 is about 215,000, something like that. So yeah. Hey, that's pretty close, right? I like pausing here because the estimate of the deal, like when you're analyzing it and you're making offers, and the reality of the deal, you hope those are pretty close. Like the better you get at real estate investing, the better you are. But we all make mistakes, and this is why we're doing these deal deep dives, is to see like what was your thought process as you're making this offer. You were doing some analysis, you were doing some due diligence, you were looking at repair costs, you were looking at rental comps. The other question I had, you mentioned that there were some cash offers, and yours was not a cash offer. Like what was your financing plan to buy this property if once it was accepted or once you got the deal?
So yes, I couldn't do conventional loan just because they needed to close quickly and move quickly. So I looked at hard money lenders, and basically they can close quickly. It's a higher premium, but yeah, they can close quickly, and it's a lot easier to get approved. You don't have to submit all this paperwork, and so I looked to that.
Okay. Can you, for those who don't know what a hard money lender is, can you give like a brief snapshot of what that is, what that means, and then how you found your particular hard money lender?
Yeah, so hard money lenders, similar to wholesalers, they mainly work with investors, and that's their whole business. They loan to investors usually for fix and flip kind of loans, like a short 1 year kind of term loans, and I think people call it a bridge loan as well, just because you're only there in it temporarily, and then you're going to refinance it, within the year, and they're made whole again, and then they can kind of use that money for a different investor property.
Can you tell me what the application process was like? Was it similar? Was it easier than a regular loan?
Oh, okay, yeah, good points. I forgot to mention those, but yeah, they're looking mainly at the property, so they do their own appraisal, and they're as far as you go, like the process is pretty easy. Like, oh, do you have a company? Which is credit score, but like even a lower credit score is acceptable. But yeah, not too much paperwork compared to like a conventional or an FHA loan. Not a lot of hoops to jump through. They're expecting you to make repairs in a sense, and they're betting on it, and they're betting on the value jumping up from what it was when you bought it.
In your case, with your hard money lender, did they require a down payment? So if you we're going to get to the actual purchase, but if you bought it for 214,000, did you have to put a certain amount of money down, or did they look at what the value would be after the repairs? Like, how did they evaluate the value of that property?
Yeah, so I put, correct, I might be wrong, but I think I put either 20 or 25% down with them, and then they looked at the ARV. And they estimated the ARV to be, what was it, 265 after repairs. And they basically couldn't loan me, I think 80%, more than 80% of the ARV in loans.
Got it. Yeah, so that's the key point of hard money lenders. They are an asset-backed lender. The hard money means the hard asset. They want to have a hard asset. So it depends on which lender you use. 70%, 80% is kind of a max that they would typically do. But the other thing is the interest rates are usually a little higher. So what was the interest? Do you remember what they quoted you on an interest rate and what the upfront fees were for a hard money loan?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, this is a mistake I wish I had after the fact. I wish I'd learned, but it was 12% interest, which is pretty high for I think a hard money lender, and then the origination, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it seemed high at the time. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So probably a couple points. They usually call points are like 1% is 1 point of a loan. So it's not uncommon to see 2 to 3% of the loan amount. So if they loan you, 150,000 bucks, then you're going to pay to $4,500 in fees in addition to appraisal fees and things like that. So the point is easier to use. They can close quickly. Not as interested in the application of you personally. More interested in the property. The fixer-upper is okay, but there's higher interest. And so this is not a long-term loan. This isn't something you can buy in cash flow as a rental. You've got to get this thing paid off. So a little bit of a sidetrack there about hard money, but I think that's helpful since this was a big part of how you did your deal.
yeah,
All right.
exactly.
So let's go back to the process. So last we talked about you made a bid on the property, 214,000. You did sort of a rough estimate ahead of time, but then did they give you an inspection period? Is that when you brought your contractor out there? Like, did you have a due diligence period where you could still get out of the deal, or were you in? Like, talk about the process of putting it under contract, due diligence, and kind of moving towards closing.
Okay, so yeah, obviously when my offer was accepted, I was very nervous. I was like, oh no, I'm committed to this deal now. But I was also, excited. So I wired them like an earnest money, the wholesaler in earnest money, and then I got to inspect the property a little bit, but apparently, well, I should have known this before, but like I kind of waived the like official inspection period, so I had to buy it as is, um, which was a little scary, obviously. Something I wouldn't do again. Like always have an inspector, like look at the property. But after that, I looked at it. I got my estimate for the repairs. I got the timeline. Part of the I guess terms with the hard money lender was I had to fix up the property in about 4.5 or 5 months. So I had that time crunch, which was good and bad. But I had that as part of the terms. So I thought I could fix it up. I thought I could stay within budget. And yeah, I thought I could proceed from there.
Got it. And so I want to go back to like the kind of the crux of this deal. We talked about a wholesaler. One of the benefits of wholesalers, they're finding deals that other people don't know about. They're not on the MLS. They're going straight to sellers. That's the good part. Mike was on this list. He found out about it. The challenge of these deals is they don't often want you to. It's very difficult to buy from a wholesaler if you're using a bank loan because they want you to go faster. You got to buy it as is. You also bought it. It sounds like you could have an inspection period, but as part of your offer, you waived that. That's especially when you're newer, having an inspection period is necessary for most people. And I've waived inspection periods pretty often now as I get more experience, and it's just an educated risk. I might make a lower offer saying, all right, if they accept this offer without an inspection period, I'm good. But you didn't have an inspection period here. You just had to do a rough estimate. But as you were moving towards closing, you had it under contract. You set them in earnest money. Which how much was your deposit? I forgot to ask you that.
It was, I believe, 15,000.
$15,000 earnest money. Okay,
Yep,
wow. Oh, big one. All right.
big one. Yeah.
Um, this is a little bit of an aside, just a comment for people to think about. Like, anytime you're sending big checks, you also want to verify like who the person is, where they, like for the wholesaler, I'd really want to make sure they have this property under contract. I know most people they are going to have it under contract, but there's fraud out there, and there's people saying, oh, I got a contract, and then they take your money and move it, run with it. Like my preference would be to send it to a closing attorney, preferably my own closing attorney. That's my best practice. So like I would have my closing attorney or my attorney, real estate attorney, I would say, all right, I'm going to wire my real estate attorney. They're going to hold it in escrow, and he's going to get or she's going to get a copy of the contract, and the attorney can show the wholesaler that earnest money is in contract. They are obligated to give it to them at closing, something like that. I mean, so it's just an aside that things get really rushed when you're buying from wholesalers. They want you to send the money. And that's something that worked out here, but it's just something for everybody to think about. Anytime you're sending big checks, writing big checks, you need to double check who they are, and you would prefer to have it with a third party who you have a relationship with, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you sent it, and what was the closing? So you had it under contract for 214. You signed a contract, and the wholesaler, I assume, gave you a contract. They're like, here's my contract. Sign this. Is that how it went down?
Yeah, closing was pretty, I guess, conventional in that sense. They had the HUD, they had all the closing documents.
Mm-hmm.
And then, closing costs with like the hard money loan, I think it was like 10,000. Yeah, 8 to 10,000 as
Okay.
well.
Got it. So you had about, I just roughed it, 40 to 50 grand a down payment, like 20 to 25% down, plus about 8,000 in closing costs. So was it about 50 to 60 grand? Was that right on the amount of
Yeah,
cash you had to come up with?
yeah, quite
All
a
right. And
lot.
so, and so for people thinking about that, I know your story on your first deal, you didn't have that much money to put down. You have saved up some money since then. Like, what would you say to people about how you came up with that cash, or how they could also do it? Because that's a big chunk of money. That's a lot of cash to put into a property.
Um, I was fortunate in a lot of senses. So I'll try to be brief, but like back in 2020, I was supposed to travel, but then the lockdown happened, and I was kind of forced to stay at home. I lived at home just because I moved out of my house hack. So I was able to save a lot of money just living at home. You're not allowed to go out, obviously during COVID lockdown. So I spent almost no money, and just the work was really busy that year. So like, yeah, just kind of just saved it a ton. And I was ready in 2021 to buy the deal.
Yeah. So you're living frugally, you're making money. You also didn't spend a lot of money in COVID. So that's you were able to set aside this 50 to 60 grand and just have it in the bank. That was your savings.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, all right. So we've closed this property. You had a closing attorney, or a title company, get you the ownership of the property. Let's start from there, and let's kind of fast forward to the reality of the deal. We talked a lot about your preparations and your analysis ahead of time. You now own this property. You've got a tenant on one side. Take me through the first couple weeks of owning the property and what you had to do.
Okay, so it was February, like January 31st when I closed it. So like right in the middle of winter. And then it was, February the next day. I had an interesting story with a tenant. So I go to the tenant's door and knock on it, and I introduce myself. Hey, I'm the new owner. Um, what's going on? Let's see if we can work something out. Um, and so I bought the property with the understanding that the tenant knew that they had to leave, and they assumed that they could stay. So there was definitely a lot of friction there, and I had to have an unpleasant, awkward conversation with them. It's like basically I need to renovate this property, and it's just not going to work out with you staying here at the property. So I had to have that conversation. That was a big, like, I guess, learning lesson there. But
I'm going to interrupt you there, Mike, but
yeah.
going back to the analysis and the due diligence, what maybe could you have done differently, or would you have done differently related specifically to the tenant, just to prepare for that, what you wish you would have done?
Yeah, I think in retrospect, maybe I should have like hounded the owner a little more. Not hounded, but asked the owner a little bit more, like, what's the tenant situation? Maybe I should have asked the tenant situation myself during the due diligence, the short due diligence period. I could have knocked on the door and be like, and asked, what's your status here, and what are your thoughts here and your expectations? Definitely, yeah, a little more due diligence on my side, in retrospect.
What happened? Like, what did they say? I'm going to move. Did you have to give them more time? Like, what was the situation?
I mean, obviously they were upset. And then luckily we worked out a term where they could stay for February and March, rent free, and they'll get their security deposit back, as long as they leave before the end of March. And it worked out. I mean, they left on time. Obviously, they left a lot of their stuff, but yeah, they left, and it was a peaceful resolution, luckily.
Got it. So you gave them an incentive. Their incentive was they can stay there rent free. If they leave, that the benefit for you was you get the property back in a month or two, and you probably assume renovating the other unit while you're waiting. Was that correct?
Yeah, so it worked out timeline wise because February and March I was like renovating that unit, and by the time the tenants left, I was almost ready to renovate their unit. So it kind of worked out in that sense.
All right, let's talk about the renovation. You alluded earlier that there was some surprises there. You estimated 25 grand. Your contractor gave you an estimate. Let's talk about what happened in this rent ready remodeling period that was a surprise, or it was just something different than you thought you were going to deal with.
Okay, so during my inspection period, maybe I was just so rushed I didn't notice, but some of the rooms had drop ceiling, and so I asked like a few of my friends like, what does it mean to have like drop ceiling? Like they said, oh, there might have been a leak. There might be ongoing leaks, and the drop ceiling is to notify like I guess the previous owner like if there's leaks. And I was like, oh, so I thought maybe there were some leaks in the ceilings. Luckily, that didn't turn out to be the case. There's no leaks, but maybe in the past there was like a roof leak. And so I had that, but then the house is a little like uneven. So it's a little slanted, and you only notice when you're in like a certain part of the house, really. And I was like, what's going on? Is my house sinking? Like, what's going on with the foundation here? So like I was getting like nightmares about that. And I was like, okay, during the renovations, I had an official inspection, and I was like, hey, I don't need you to inspect the whole property. I just want you to inspect the big capex stuff, the foundation, the roof, the outside siding, and all of that. Um, and so we did the inspection there, and luckily he said nothing's wrong with the foundation. There's no cracks or anything, but there are like like metal beams, like around the basement. So I guess there was work on the foundation before. And he said there wasn't anything to worry about, at least as of now, but keep monitoring it. So that was like a big whoa. Like definitely get an inspection before you go under contract, or while you're under contract.
Right. Or
Um,
yeah, or worst case, if you have a really good inspector, like if you had to move quickly, I'm thinking about some deals I've done before. If you have a really trusted contractor who really will find everything that's major cost, if you had an
mhm.
hour to inspect this property, take that contractor with you, crawl up around every bit of the crawl space, crawl in the attic, have them look at the roof, have them look at all the big expensive stuff, and an experienced contractor or an inspector, it's great to have either one on your team. They're going to see those red flags. They're going to say, Mike, this, and this, or I'm a little worried about. And so I guess there's having an inspection and having the report and the 2 weeks notice of due diligence. That's the ideal, right? But
Yeah.
if anybody ever finds themselves in that situation, that contractor inspector is like your key team member to be able to help you identify that stuff.
Yep. Yep. Luckily I had a contractor, but yeah, he didn't see any red flags, but yeah, we didn't look that hard around the basement, and we didn't really notice the leak, or not the leak, but the kind of uneven flooring.
Got it. Okay. So you're in the middle of the renovation when you do this inspection. They didn't find anything major other than saying, "Hey, look, there's been some foundation work before. There's some new beams, some metal support structures. Maybe an old house. That's not uncommon, right? So it's not necessarily a bad thing." Um, did you come out on budget? Like what kinds of things did you do for 25 grand, and what was your final repair cost?
Okay, so the bulk of the renovation was just a big lipstick renovation, just cosmetics, a lot of painting, a lot of replacing interior doors, a lot of hardware fixes, kind of weird like knickknacks that I had to fix as well. There was there was in one of the rooms there was like a ceiling that was kind of drooping. I don't know how else to describe it, but I do have a picture. I can share that. But it was like drooping really bad, and I had to kind of replace that whole ceiling, and the light fixtures. There was a lot of light fixtures that needed to be installed. There was blinds that needed to be done. A few windows also needed to be replaced. More or less, yeah, nothing too major. Just yeah, big lipstick renovation, I would say.
And did your numbers come out? Were you accurate on the 25 grand?
Yeah, it came out to 26 grand in total for everything. So pretty much right within budget, even though it's technically over budget. It's like actually not terrible.
That's good. That's really close. Yes, absolutely. All right. So far so good, right? I mean, you had your 214 purchase price. You did have some closing costs and repair costs, but you're close, and you've got this property remodeled. The tenant, both units are empty. Let's just do like kind of a quick synopsis of what happened from there. You got it rent ready. It's fixed up. You now have to go get it rented. What was that process like? Especially, describing some of the details of how you found a tenant. Did you use a property manager? I'm just curious how that worked.
Okay, so yeah, after the stressful and real sprint of 4 months that was repairing the place, renovating, or so after that, I actually had to get it inspected by the hard money lender. They wanted to make sure all the boxes were checked. So I passed the inspection. They said, everything's great. So I did that, and now it's rent ready. And that honestly, that was like the easy part because my property manager kind of did everything for me. Luckily, we finished around June time. So, I mean, that's midst of summer. Everybody's looking for a place. So it was not hard finding a tenant. Had a lot of showings, even like in May, like when we were still renovating the property, I would always see like people walking through the other unit and looking at it. So, that part was fairly easy. Yeah. I guess that means like the renovations were good and the repairs were good. It looked nice, clean. So it attracted a lot of prospective tenants.
And you do use a property manager, so I know that just from your story. And so were they the ones who handled the marketing, the leasing, taking tenant calls? Like how involved were you, or were you involved at all in that process?
So I barely like they take care of like all the marketing, the Zillow listings, and they have a whole system for doing the showings, very automated. And once a week or maybe twice a week, I would just get an email of how many people looked at the property, how many people actually showed up to the property, how many people were interested, and even like the tenant or the prospective tenants' ratings of the properties. And it all checked all the boxes, and it was really smooth actually, that part.
So, and I want to get to the finished product, getting it rented, what they rented for, what the numbers were. But just an aside with your actual property manager, we focus a lot on team and how important team is. Like, how did you find your property manager?
So for my first property, I used a real estate agent, and I mean, real estate agents are the best. They're so well connected with everybody, almost anybody you need. Title, loan officer, and luckily this agent knew a good property management company. I had interviewed like about 3 property management companies back then, and this one stood out among the rest. So I went with them. Obviously, they're not perfect, and I do need to follow up as I should and make sure everything's done. But they've been good. They've been really good.
Okay, good. All right, so they got your property rented. I think you said it's 4 or 5 months after you bought it. It's been rented. So you had it remodeled it for 4 months. Within a month or so, it's rented out, and you got tenants in there. Is that right?
Yep. So the first unit, I got my first tenant like late May or early June, and then the second unit, I think they moved in July, or yeah, or like early July, I think.
Okay, and both were 1250 per month.
Yes, both were 1250.
All right, so you got $1,500 in rent. I mean, I'm sorry, $2,500 in rent. Do my math there. Let's do a recap. I'm also gonna recap the financing because we went over some details that I want to go back to on how you financed it and what happened from there. So, buy the property. You had to put a down payment. You got a hard money loan to cover part of the purchase. Did the hard money cover any of the remodel costs for you, like that 25 grand?
Uh, yes, they did. They covered 10 grand. They couldn't cover everything because it would kind of surpass the ARV,
Got it.
but they covered 10 grand.
Let's talk about those overall numbers. Did you get a new appraisal at that point? And to get a new value, you said their estimated value was 265. What was the value in the end after you're doing all this?
They got appraised for 245, which is a lot lower than I was expecting. But yeah, 245, and then I had a talk with like my loan officer, And he's like, "What do you want to do?" And I said basically, "What can we try reappraising it with a different company?" And I don't know what to do. Yeah, but like basically that was my solution: try to get it reappraised at the time, and see if we can get a higher number. A tip that he said was to do your research, look at other properties, and kind of do your own self appraisal. Look at other properties that have sold recently, that kind of compares to yours, um, and then like kind of give that printed sheet to the appraiser, not to like say, hey, this is what it's worth, but like just to show that I've done my research and due diligence. Like this is what it should be worth. Um, so I did that, and to be honest, a lot of when I did my appraisal, yeah, like a lot of the duplexes that were nearby weren't even close to as like big as mine. So I kind of gave that cushion as well, just because mine was purely bigger by square footage. And I still had it at around 265, 260, 265. Um, and so, yeah, I did a second appraisal. I even was there like doing with the appraiser, and just kind of showing him around. And, I gave him the sheet and everything. I did my research and, kind of told him, yeah, I did my research. This is what I think it should have been appraised for. Um, I don't know if that was like the right thing to do or not, but
Did you
that's
show
what I
him the
did.
remodels? I found in the past, like sometimes there's a
Ah,
big
yeah.
variance on like, hey, this property is in this condition, this one's not. So I mean, you just did a nice remodel to the property, obviously showing them. Did you show them a list of what you did to the property as well?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but I did have like a checklist of everything I did, and it even included before and after pictures. So I came in with a packet, yeah, prepared
Great.
as
And how'd that
best I
go?
could.
So you were in the process of refinancing to pay off the hard money lender, get a new loan. Well, what was the second appraisal?
Okay, it was better, yeah, 260, which is just fine at that point. I was just like, yeah, the more reappraisals, so 260 was fine. And from there, yeah, I went on to refinance it.
Tell us a little bit about that loan. So, and then we'll get to the kind of the final numbers here. So, I assume you got about an 80% or 75% loan to what 75 to 80% of the value, and then what were the terms of that loan?
Yeah, so it could only be 75%, unfortunately. My loan officer said it was a rental and it's a multi-unit, so 75% is the highest they could go. So I did that. I got very lucky because this was 2021 and interest rates were really low. So that was just lucky timing, but I got a 30-year fixed for 3.5% interest.
And I just want to give people the perspective. So, like the moving of money is always a little confusing. Like up front, you had to come up with 50 to 60 grand, including all the closing costs. So you had to have that much cash. But now you are getting a loan for 190, and you're having to pay off the hard money loan. Which do you remember how much the hard money loan was at that point?
I th- I think it was like 180,
180.
more or less. Yeah.
Got it. So you're able to pay off the hard money lender. You're able to get some money back to pay some closing costs, but essentially you still have 50, 60 grand in the property. Maybe a little bit more because of the repairs, right? You had to pay for 15,000 or 16,000 out of pocket. So maybe 60, 70 grand total in the house.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of money in the house, definitely. This was not a Burr loan or a Burr strategy whatsoever, but
Yeah, but
somehow
I
came
think
in.
that's it's good for
Mhm.
people to know that. Like not every deal is going to be one where you increase the value, you pull all your money back out. That's great if you can do that. But I mean, this is a base hit double kind of deal, right? And so and you've remodeled it. Let's do kind of a summary, snapshot of this deal to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
You've got it rented out, and I want to the new value is 260. You bought it for 215 plus you put $25,000 into it, so we got about 230,000 bucks plus some closing costs, maybe 230 to 240 in the deal is worth 260. So there's about 20 to $30,000 in equity in the property. That's always a good sign, right? That you didn't pay full price for the property. You've got $2,500 coming in rent. Do you remember what your rough cash flow was after what? Like let's talk about what your mortgage payment was, and then we know what your rent's 2,500. We'll just do kind of a rough number on how much cash flow you're bringing in every month.
Okay, so uh, I'll just use like this year's number because the rent went up a little bit. So right now the rent is 2,600 per month, just because there's like a pet fee. So 2,600 per month. Um, and then one thing actually I wanted to mention that was a big surprise to me, like even during the renovation part, was the I underestimated the holding costs, and that really put me over budget, I think.
Mm.
Um, I underestimated like the monthly payments to the hard money lender, and really how much I spent on just holding the property and waiting to refinance it.
So what's
Um,
included in holding? Just so people realize, you had interest to your hard money lender. That's one holding cost. What are some of the other ones you had to pay while you're sitting there for 5 months waiting to get it rented?
Utilities, and part of the yeah, part of the insurance I basically had to pay up front
Mm.
for the year, and that ate up a big chunk of cash. Yeah, just about, I did the math here, 20,000 in holding costs almost.
Mm.
Um, just just holding on to the property while I was doing the loan, or while I was doing the renovations, but then also refinancing it. Refinancing it also took a lot longer than expected as well.
Yeah, because a hard money loan is at 12%. That's $1,800 a month on a $180,000 loan. So 1,800 times for 10 months would be 18,000. So it's gonna be 15 grand or so, and just interest. Then you add taxes and insurance in there. I can see how that gets there. If you include utilities in Philadelphia during the winter, that's going to be expensive as well. So got it. Yeah, that's a big one. And so all of these, I'm going to do some future videos on the channel, just going in, and maybe it'd be a good idea, Mike, that we could do I could do some analysis after the deal deep dive and like do the whiteboard numbers on your deal and other deals. But estimating holding costs, estimating closing costs, those are ones that we all forget sometimes. So I'm glad you brought that up. All right,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
I'm interrupting you there, but your 2,600 a month was in the rent you have. I'll let you keep going there with the final numbers.
Okay. So 2,600 a month, which is 31,200 per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then as far as operating expenses, I do have them listed here. The taxes are really high, at 7,700 a year. It's just a, high tax county. Insurance was 1,900 a month. Management, 2,700 a month. Oh,
And that,
sorry.
yeah,
Insurance was 1,900 a year,
good.
and then management was 2,700 a year. For maintenance and capex, I did 8% for each. So that equals 2,500 a year in maintenance and capex. And then vacancy, I was a little maybe generous, but I did 5% vacancy just because it's a multi-unit. I don't expect it to be vacant too often. So I did 1,500 in vacancy per year. And then the mortgage interest is 6,300 a year, uh, or for this year. And then the principal would be 3,700 for this year.
All right, so maybe we can write all those down and have people can visualize it if they're listening on the podcast. But what's the grand total there? So when we take the rent of 31,200, we subtract all those expenses. What do we have there at the bottom line?
$200 a month net income after financing, and that's for the
Awesome.
whole property.
Okay, cool. So 2,200 a month, 2,400 per year, and net income after financing, otherwise known as cash flow. And you've been pretty conservative with your numbers there. You've got a good capex and maintenance budget, which a lot of people forget. You've got a vacancy budget. Those property taxes are pretty. They vary around the country, but some states are higher than others. Some cities are higher than others. I like to use a rule of thumb on taxes. Like in some of my properties, if I can get 2 months of rent to pay the property taxes, like if the rent's $2,000 and the property taxes are $4,000, that's pretty good. Like that's a normal. If it's less than that, that's great. In your case, 2,600 a month, that's almost 3 months. That's about 3 months, almost 3 months of rent. So it's a little on the high side, for sure. You can think of it that way. I'm taking 3 months to pay my property taxes before I can even pay anything else and pay my other expenses. But hey, you got to pay them. That's part of your you're paying for sewer and taxes and police and fire protection.
That's
Um,
right.
what are your thoughts? I want to get just kind of a summary. We've given people the numbers. We've told the story. I think one of the most valuable pieces of feedback people can get as we wrap this up here is what you're kind of watching game film of your deal. What went well? What didn't go well that you learned from it and that other people can learn from this deal?
Yeah, absolutely. Things that went well, I would say the repairs were good. It's very pretty, to my standards at least. It's not like luxurious or anything, but it was pretty enough to attract good tenants, long-term tenants. I did something. that I learned from you, Chad, was to look at the market rent and try to list your rent below that, slightly below it. And so I did that. And then I added a preference to long-term renters. And so both of those tenants have 2-year leases. And I expect them to stay there longer. So I think I did that right. It's cash flowing after all the conservative numbers, $200 per month, which is yeah right about my goal. So that's okay. Um, I got lucky with the refinance. I mean, imagine if I refinanced it last year, 6%. But luckily, it was 3.5% interest. I was really happy about that. Um, Now it's really hands off because my property manager does the day to day if there's anything, and it's very easy now. And it's just checking emails, checking the statements, doing the bookkeeping. So that's really good. And then finally, I made a lot of mistakes, which I'll get to, and I acknowledge them happily. And yeah, basically, I'm ready to move on as hopefully a smarter investor next time after this.
Well, if you don't mind talking about what are some of those mistakes? We've kind of talked about some in the process, but just in the spirit of learning and getting better here, what were some of the ones that you could take back or you wish you would have done better as you're reflecting on this deal?
The contractor story was interesting. I kind of wish I had a different contractor. Um, I'll give the short of it, but like it was a lot of babysitting the contractor, and he had in the middle of the repairs, he actually had a little falling out with his subcontractor, who was the painter, and so I actually stepped in myself and helped him paint until he found a new subcontractor to paint, like stuff like that. Like yeah, I wish I had like a different, more trusted contractor, which I do now, I think. Um, and then I wish I had done my due diligence. Back to the due diligence again. I wish I had done my due diligence to find out that the tenants did not know they were leaving, and to spare myself from that awkward, unpleasant conversation I had with the tenant.
Mike, I really appreciate you being open to sharing your details of the story. I want to set the tone for these deal deep dives, and you're a great person to do that. To show we want to share the details of deals. We don't want to hold back. We want to show the good, the bad, all the numbers. Do you have any final comments for people listening to this about your deal, about real estate investing in general, just to give people some encouragement as we close here?
I would say for the viewers, the listeners, it's not going to be a perfect, smooth sailing ride all the time. You're not going to hit a home run all the time. Maybe it'll take a little while. Everybody's different, but just keep making mistakes and keep learning from them, and just kind of keep moving forward and make the leap. I would say to your listeners, be wary of who you trust. When you find that person you trust, like your property manager, your agent, hang on to them for dear life, because there's a lot of people in this business maybe that are more for themselves, and that's just kind of the nature of things. And they're not like in your best interest; they're kind of in their own best interest. But yeah, just be careful and wary of who you trust and who you let into your inner circle.
Thank you again, Mike. And I want to give you a chance real quick. If people want to connect with you offline or online, I'm going to put links to all this in the show notes, but let everybody know where they can connect with you or follow up with you if they want to do that after the show.
Sure. I don't have a social account or anything that's really active. So you can email me directly at mnwin474@gmail.com. I'm very responsive on there. If you want to just chat, I'm happy to chat, talk shop, whatever. Yeah.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much again. Look forward to reconnecting with you on the next deal you do. And thanks again for being our second deal deep dive investor.
Yeah, absolutely, Chad. Thanks for having me on again. I'll see you next time.
See you soon. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to that latest edition of the Deal Deep Dive with Michael Wynn. I hope you enjoyed it. I would always love to hear from you. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, or if you're listening on the podcast, send me an email to podcast@coachcarson.com with any feedback, any suggestions on how we can make the show better, things you like, things we can improve on. I would always love to hear from you. And I also want to mention in this episode, we're going to have show notes with some pictures of Michael's property. So if you're just interested in visualizing what exactly it looked like and you're listening to it on the podcast, go to the show notes in the link in the video description or the podcast description, where we'll have pictures and we'll also have other links that we mentioned in the episode. Look forward to seeing you next week. We've got more detailed episodes coming out on topics that are relevant to you to help you build a thriving rental property business. I'll see you soon. If you like the show, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my free email newsletter at coachcarson.com/REI Toolkit. In addition to weekly updates, articles, and behind-the-scenes tips from me, my email newsletter subscribers get my real estate investing toolkit, which includes a property closing checklist that I actually use when I buy properties, a real estate deal worksheet, a tenant screening criteria checklist, and other spreadsheets and goodies that will help you on your journey to financial independence using real estate. You can get it all for free at coachcarson.com/REI Toolkit. I also want to take this time to thank some people behind the scenes who make this podcast possible each and every week. This includes my podcast editor extraordinaire, Michael Wynn, my amazing virtual assistant, Megan Thompson, my wife, Carrie, who helps me behind the scenes and is my partner here at Coach Carson. And of course, thank you to all of you, the listeners of this show who make everything possible. This show exists for you. It exists because of you. And I really appreciate you being here for another episode. Everything I've shared with you in this episode has been for general education purposes. I have not considered your specific situation or risks. Before buying your own investments, be sure to consult a financial, real estate, and/or a legal professional. Until next time, I'm Chad Carson. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. See you next time.